this is a story I wanted to share that's really special to me, but I think will inspire a lot of people to want to serve the Lord. I was serving in an area called Konongo. It's sort of in the eastern portion of the Ashanti region in Ghana. And one day we were proselyting and we were going to an investigator's house, and that investigator wasn't home. And on our way back, we heard someone hiss at us off to the side. And hissing is not normal there. That's how they get your attention. They sort of hiss like a snake. So they hissed at us, and we walked over there, and we found this young lady. She's probably about 22, sitting on the ground. And she told us that she knew who we were and that she wanted to talk to us, but she didn't have time today, and she wanted us to come back the next day to talk with her. So we left, and the next day we came back, and we found her, and she was sitting there in the same spot. And she was so excited to see us, and she invited us to sit down. And we sat down and we started to get her story. And it turns out when she was a little girl, she was about 9 or 10 years old, she was going to church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that branch there in Konongo. And she loved it, and she'd been going for a couple of years. But her dad didn't like the church. He was sort of anti. And when she told him that she wanted to get baptized, he was really upset, and he wouldn't let her. And her parents were divorced at that time, and he took her back to Kumasi for her to go to school. And so she left Konongo one day, and just no one ever saw her at church again. And her dad put her in a boarding school, and while he promised he would take care of her, he didn't. He paid the school fees, and that's about it. He didn't give her any money for food or anything like that, and so she had to do things, very unfortunate things, to be able to pay for food so that she could live, and that's so that she could get through school. And in the process, she got pregnant, and her pregnancy forced her out of school. She wasn't able to finish, and she had a little boy. A few weeks after giving birth, she was walking to work one day. She was a seamstress, so she was sewing clothing. She suddenly collapsed in the road, and she hadn't walked since that day that we saw her, or the day that we met her, and it had been about a year since she fell. And here she was, paralyzed, couldn't walk, and her mom was taking care of her, and she had a baby, and she was uneducated. And she said for the first time in all year, she felt light in her life when she saw us. She knew who we were, and she knew who we represented, and she gained the courage to talk to us because she recognized that of all the bad things happening in her life, that the gospel that she had known had been true this whole time was the only thing that was going to bring her that happiness. And so we were very privileged to be able to teach her. Her name, I won't say her name. But one major problem we had, she never got baptized when she was little. And so one major problem we had was getting her to church. She wanted to get baptized so badly, but she couldn't walk. And she lived in sort of an unnavigable place. Cars couldn't get to her house very easily, and she really had no way to get to church. And in the mission, there was a policy of the investigator had come to church at least 3 times before they could be baptized. And so this was a big trial to get her to church. We didn't have a car, and most people in Ghana don't own a car, and it was really hard to get her there. However, a tragedy sort of turned into a blessing when their landlord kicked them out because he wanted to bulldoze the house or knock the house over and build a new house. And so they were forced to move. And they ended up moving into an area that was a lot easier to get to. And there was a member in the ward. He'd been a member for a really long time. He was about 70 years old. And he owned a car. And we asked him one day if he would come to this house and meet this investigator. We were trying to help him form a relationship so that he could help bring her to church. And when we brought him to her house, he saw her and he just started weeping. And he kept on saying her name over and over again. And I remember thinking, like, how does he know this girl? And she was crying too, and they were both weeping and just so happy. And we found out that he was the branch president at the time when she was going to the branch when she was a little girl. And he knew her, and when he saw her, he was instantly just overwhelmed. And he told her that he'd been looking for her for years. He never knew where she went. He didn't know what happened to her. And when he found her, it was really emotional for him. And so of course he was very willing to help bring her to church. But her not walking was still a big problem. And I remember one day studying 3 Nephi chapter 17 when Christ heals the people. And of course she was in my mind the whole time. And I remember just pondering about how we know that miracles happen, but we just don't think about it very often. We think that those days are kind of over. I mean, we know miracles happen, but what's the chance of it happening in my life, kind of a thing. And I just had a really big faith check to think or to ponder about if I really had the faith that Heavenly Father could and would heal her and help her to come to church. And I talked to my companion about it, and that day we had a great lesson with her. We read through 3 Nephi 17 with her, and we had a nice conversation about faith and about how God cares about all of His children, and how God knows exactly what she was going through, and that if she had enough faith and if we had enough faith, He would do exactly what was necessary for her to be baptized and for her to receive, or to make that covenant and receive those blessings. And we came back a few days later, and she was very happy. And when we inquired sort of as to why she was so happy, she shared a story with us that night after we left, she had a dream. And in her dream, she came to the church building there in Konongo, just a rented little building. And she said when she got there, all of the men and the missionaries circled around her and put their hands on her head and gave her a blessing. And in that blessing, they told her that she would be healed and that she would walk again. And she woke up, and she just had this determination or this willpower to walk. And she put her legs over the side of the bed, and she stood up, and she started walking. And it's the first time she'd walked in over a year. And she walked around her whole compound, and she came and sat back down. And a few days later, when we came, she was telling us about it. And naturally, I wanted to ask her, or I wanted her to like show me, you know. And I wanted her to tell, or to just start walking for me. But it's interesting how I just felt like I shouldn't. You know, I didn't want to test God. I trusted her. I trusted that what she said happened, and I was okay with that. And I didn't need to see it for myself to know that God was able to do what He did. There's a lot more to the story, but long story short, I believe 3 weeks later after that, I remember watching her walk up the steps into the baptismal font. and being baptized, and realizing more than ever that God is a God of miracles, and that God can do so many powerful things, and that you cannot have those experiences anywhere else except for on mission. And for anyone to go and to serve a mission is the best thing they can ever do, and that's the only way they can receive those great blessings and to see things that they wouldn't normally see, and to be able to have their testimony grow in ways that I don't think can grow that way anywhere else. And it was a great experience for me, and it was a great testimony builder to know, and I can truly testify that God is a God of miracles, and everyone that serves a mission will see that, and will see his hand in the work.